They are already done by the time most people are still looking for parking at the gym. No changing rooms, no waiting for equipment, no navigating the social landscape of a floor full of strangers. Just their space, their weights, their music, their pace, their rules. Most people hear this and assume one thing: convenience. They prefer it because it is easier. But that explanation only accounts for the practical surface. Underneath the convenience is something far more psychologically interesting. Because for a significant number of people who prefer training at home, the preference is not about saving time. It is about protecting something that the commercial gym consistently takes away. To understand what that something is, you have to start with what happens to human performance when it is being observed. Research in sports psychology has consistently documented what is known as social evaluation anxiety, the measurable decline in performance quality that occurs when a person believes they are being watched and assessed. Studies on athletes found that even professional performers complete identical tasks less effectively in the presence of spectators than without them. The observation changes the internal experience of the effort before the first rep even begins. Now place someone with a meaningful level of social physique anxiety into a commercial gym at peak hour. Social physique anxiety is the specific, well-documented fear that others are critically evaluating your body or physical performance. Research published in PMC found that social physique anxiety directly mediates exercise frequency. It does not just make the gym uncomfortable, it actively reduces how often people show up. And critically, people with high social physique anxiety often do not consciously attribute their avoidance to fear. They tell themselves they are tired, busy, not feeling it today. The anxiety is running underneath the surface, producing behavior without announcing itself, which means millions of people are making training decisions based on a psychological process they have never identified or named. The home removes that process entirely. There is no one to evaluate the weight you are using, no one to notice the form breaking down on the last set, no one to compare against, consciously or unconsciously. What remains is the work, just the work. And for people with social physique anxiety, that removal of social evaluation does not just make training more comfortable. It makes it possible in a way it simply is not in a public environment. But social physique anxiety is only one part of this, because not everyone who prefers home training carries significant anxiety about observation. For some, the preference is rooted in something entirely different: personality. And specifically, where a person falls on the introversion and neuroticism dimensions of the Big Five personality model. A 2025 study from University College London, published in Frontiers in Psychology by Dr. Flaminia Ronca and colleagues, measured how personality traits predict exercise enjoyment and preference across 132 participants in an 8-week training program. One of the clearest findings was that participants who scored high in neuroticism, a trait characterized by a tendency toward anxiety, emotional sensitivity, and negative emotional states, consistently preferred private workout conditions over observed or lab-based testing. They were less likely to record their heart rate during training. They preferred training without monitoring. The researchers explicitly suggested these individuals appreciate being given space for independence and privacy when exercising. But here's what is remarkable. These same participants, who scored high in neuroticism and strongly preferred private conditions, showed the most significant reduction in stress of any personality group after the 8-week program. The people who need private training conditions the most are also the people who benefit from training the most. The preference for home is not avoidance of challenge. It is the condition required for the training to deliver its full psychological return. Strip away the privacy and the training still happens, but a portion of its psychological value goes with it. The stress relief, the internal focus, the deep quality of attention that makes training feel meaningful rather than merely effortful. This is why dismissing home training as the coward's option fundamentally misunderstands what is happening in the mind of the person doing it. Now let us go deeper into motivation. Because the preference for home training consistently reveals something about the type of motivation a person brings to exercise, and that type matters enormously. Self-determination theory, developed by Deci and Ryan across decades of research, identifies two fundamentally different qualities of motivation. Autonomous motivation, which comes from genuine interest, values, and internal drive, and controlled motivation, which comes from external pressure, social expectation, or the need for external validation. Research consistently shows that people with autonomous motivation, those who train because they genuinely want to, because it connects to something real about their values and identity, show significantly better long-term adherence, better training quality, and higher psychological well-being from exercise. People with controlled motivation, those who train to be seen, to match the social environment of the gym, to perform fitness for others, are consistent only as long as the audience and the comparison are available. The commercial gym is structurally an environment that amplifies controlled motivation. The mirrors, the crowds, the unspoken ranking of bodies and weights, it rewards performance. It makes training for external validation feel natural and normal. The home gym strips all of that away. There's no performance available. You cannot show off to an empty room. You cannot lift for an audience that does not exist. What you are left with is yourself and the honest reason you are doing this. And for the person who trains at home consistently, that honest reason is almost always deeply autonomous. They are not training to be seen. They are training because training is part of who they are. The home makes that self-evident in a way the commercial gym never quite does. A systematic review on self-determination theory and exercise found a consistent and significant positive association between intrinsic autonomous motivation and long-term exercise adherence. In other words, the person training in their garage at 6 a.m. with no audience is not less disciplined than the person who needs the gym environment to show up. In most cases, they are more disciplined. Their motivation does not depend on external conditions to sustain itself. There is also something specific about the relationship between environment and identity that home training reveals. Because choosing to train at home is not passive, it is an active construction. You do not drift into a home gym. You build one, piece by piece over time, according to your own priorities. The equipment you choose, the space you carve out, the hours you protect. All of it reflects a person who has internalized training so deeply that they have altered their physical environment to accommodate it. That is a different relationship to training than membership in a gym you visit when convenient. It is an identity statement written in iron and floor space. Research on exercise mode preference found that personality traits, motivations, and behavioral regulation together shape not just what type of exercise a person chooses, but what kind of environment they need to do it in. The home trainer has answered that question for themselves with unusual clarity. They have matched environment to psychology with a precision that most people never reach. But here is the layer that most conversations about home training completely miss, and it is the most psychologically honest one. Training at home removes the social mirror, the constant implicit comparison to bodies and performances that are more advanced than yours, the ambient awareness of where you fall in the gym's unspoken hierarchy. For some people, that comparison is motivating. It pushes them. The social energy of the gym floor activates something competitive that performs better under observation. For others, that same comparison is corrosive. It pulls focus away from their own process and redirects it outward toward a social calculation that has nothing to do with what they actually need from the training. The home trainer has typically figured out which one they are, not through theory, through experience, through the discovery that something shifts when no one is watching. That shift is not weakness. It is not hiding. It is the particular relief of a person whose internal experience of training is richer and more productive than their social performance of it. and rich internal experience of training, it turns out, is what builds the long-term relationship with exercise that produces actual results, not the performance, the process. Research on personality and indoor versus outdoor fitness activities found that the environment where exercise takes place significantly influences psychological outcomes, motivation levels, and behavioral regulation. The person who has found the right environment for their psychology is not making a compromise. They're making an optimization. Even if that optimization looks, from the outside, like they're training in their basement in old clothes with no one watching, there's also a practical truth here that deserves to be said plainly. No commute, no waiting, no decision fatigue about when the gym is quiet enough. The training happens, or it does not, and the only friction standing between them, and it is the door to the next room. For a person with autonomous motivation, that reduction in friction is not laziness. It is the removal of every obstacle between intention and action. And the removal of those obstacles is precisely what allows training to become daily rather than occasional. Now, here is the honest paradox the home trainer has to face. Because training at home has a specific psychological failure mode that the commercial gym does not. The same conditions that make home training psychologically optimal for the right person make it structurally invisible for the wrong one. Nobody is expecting you. Nobody notices if you skip. The friction of non-participation is almost zero. For the person with genuine autonomous motivation, this is not a problem. They show up because they are the kind of person who trains, regardless of whether anyone is watching or waiting. But for the person who has invested in home equipment, hoping that the environment will create the motivation, the equipment will wait patiently while they do not use it. The space will not generate the identity. It will only reflect the identity that was already there. This is a sharp and important distinction. And most people building their first home gym do not want to hear it. The home gym works for people who are already the person who trains. For everyone else, it is expensive evidence of a gap between who they want to be and who they currently are. The person who genuinely prefers to train at home is not avoiding difficulty. They are not taking the easy path. They are operating in the precise conditions that allow their mind to produce its best physical effort. They have done the psychological work of understanding themselves clearly enough to build a life around what that effort actually requires. Without apology, without performance, without an audience to validate that it counts. And that clarity, quiet, private, unglamorous, tends to produce results that outlast every gym membership that was really about being seen rather than about getting strong. If this made you think honestly about why you train where you train, subscribe and hit the bell for more psychology that goes deeper than the workout.